All right. So, hi everyone. We're going to look at the Kaddish, the Kaddishim, I guess we could say. And before we do that, let's say our brachot for our learning. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So let's just sort of brainstorm for a moment. What are some things that you already know about Kaddish? Anybody, just throw out points that you already know about the Kaddish prayer.
Well, as they come up in the service, they are separators. They separate sections.
Good. Yes. So one thing we know, and maybe we'll just put these into our chat and then I'll copy them once, God willing, once we load this on to YouTube and all that. So we know that Kaddish serves as a separator of sections in the prayer service. Okay, good. What else do we know?
It's not in Hebrew.
It's not in Hebrew. What language is it in?
Aramaic.
Yes. Okay, good. Although I'm going to put a little asterisk on that because if the last paragraph is Oseh Shalom b'mromav, so at least some of the Kaddishes have a little bit of Hebrew in it. Okay, good. What else do we know? When are some of the what are some of the rituals associated with Kaddish?
You
Mourner
say it for a
stand.
year.
One more time.
Sylvia.
Sylvia
Oh,
first.
mourners stand.
Mourners stand for many of the Kaddishes.
And then there's bowing at Oseh Shalom, which I never can figure out how to do right.
Okay. So part of the choreography is during Oseh Shalom, there's bodily movement. Okay, we'll just leave it at that. What else?
You say it for a year after the passing of a close family relative.
So which one is that you're referencing?
The mourners Kaddish.
Yes, it's going to be the Mourners Kaddish, and we should add and in Conservative and Orthodox settings, we say Kaddish D'Rabanan when we are in our first year of mourning. Now let's just tighten this a little bit. It's actually for the first 11 months. And we can discuss that as well. What else do we know?
I'm not sure this really is important to, but when you get to the Hadron prayer at the end of Masechet, we also do Kaddish D'Rabanan at a Siyum.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of a Masechet as part of the Siyum. Okay. Good. Okay, and then one other thing that I think most people know but don't really know why is during High Holy Days. So during Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, 10 days of repentance, we add a word. What is it? Shmei Rabba V'Rach Le'olam. Wait, what is it? No. Le'ela Ul'eilah. Ul'eilah. Okay. All right.
Oh,
All
I
of
have
this.
one more.
Okay, go ahead.
Just that, well, it's words of praise as opposed to having, there's no words about death or anything like that.
Okay, so the fancy term for this is it's a doxology, an acknowledgement of godliness, i.e., an acknowledgement of God's greatness, not a mourner's prayer. Okay, good. Very good. That's very helpful because that one plays a big role in some of this. Okay, any last thoughts about that's a lot that we already know. And most of what you already know comes from the fact that you've been saying Kaddish in one form or another, for one reason or another, for a very long time. So I'm going to actually do a little bit of book reading because I think that this book is so great. I mentioned it over the last couple of weeks off recording, but this is a book that basically every HUC student is encouraged to grab it. It is a scholarly analysis of the prayer book, and it is very popular among liberal rabbis, both Reform and Conservative. I've been asked to find things in this book from colleagues who are conservative as well. So I want to share a little bit that this Kaddish is... wait, I'm in the wrong page. Okay. That the nucleus of the Kaddish, according to this book, is the blessing, Yehei Shemei Rabbah Mevarach Le'olam U'almei Almaya. May God's great name be blessed forever and ever, which is heard to be an echo of the words found in the book of Daniel 2:20. So let's take a quick look at Daniel 2:20. Let me pull it up. Hold on. And here we go. Daniel spoke up and said, "Let the name of God be blessed forever and ever." Let's look at this bilingually. Okay. I need to change this to this. And notice that in this book of Daniel, Daniel is the only book of the Bible that has a significant chunk that's written in Aramaic. Ane Daniel answered V'amar and said, this is Aramaic, Leheve Shemei D'Elaha Mevarach Min Alma Va'ad Alma. Okay, it sounds a lot like Yehei Shemei Rabbah Mevarach Le'olam U'almei Almaya. Just a different kind of expression of it. And forever in the way we do it, I guess has more of a plural component to it. Although my Aramaic is a little rusty, and this Aramaic is not really the same Aramaic as what we have in the Talmud, so it always has to be qualified. But you see here that it is in the book of Daniel. And if we go to Psalm 113, verse 2, we also see Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach Me'ata V'ad Olam. Yehi Shemei Rabbah. Rabbah is an addition. Yehi Shemei Rabbah Mevarach. And here it said, this edition is Adonai. God is actually explicitly stated. Yehei Shemei Rabbah Mevarach. May God's great name be blessed. La'alam U'almei Almaya means forever and ever. And here it's Me'ata V'ad Olam, from now until eternity, or until forever. So you have this kind of rhythm that's already in the prayer book. In the Bible, in the Tanakh, that is essentially a statement of praise. And as Elbogen points out, in the blessing, it was customary in the temple to say that famous line we know, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed, Where do we find that? Anybody?
Shema. The Shema.
In the Shema, right? Baruch Shem Kavod. And it's always funny the way the sentence is broken down. I think we often do it incorrectly. Baruch Shem Kavod. May the name be... Blessed is the name. Glory is his kingdom. Le'olam. Is that right? Le'olam va'ed. Forever and... Oops. My Hebrew typing sometimes is a little weak, especially when I have a messed up finger. Forever and ever. That's my doctor, but that's okay. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam va'ed. Blessed is God's glorious name. His kingdom is forever and ever. That is a parallel to Yehi Shmei Rabbah Mevarach Le'olam Olamei Almayah. Both of these statements are things that are sort of inserted in. They're not actually within the biblical sources per se. They are modern, or modern by 2,000 years ago standards, additions that are purely liturgical, but are based on sources. You may remember Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam va'ed are words that, according to some traditions, Jacob says to his sons on his deathbed. And there's readings about that as well. So all of the references to Kaddish in Talmudic literature relate to this Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam va'ed, to which they attribute supreme importance. May God's name be blessed is to the rabbis of the Talmud the hymn of hymns, he says, Elbogen. The first Tana, as in the first rabbi from the Mishnaic period, to mention this verse is Rabbi Yosef ben Chalafta in Sifrei, in Sifrei Deuteronomy. And then later on, Rava says, may the great name, Yehi Shemei Rabbah, of the Agadah, as one of... He says that it is one of the things in which the world stands. So it's seen as given a lot of significance. It's like praise for a sentence of praise. It's very interesting. And so the rule is that for every sermon that was given had to conclude with words of consolation. That is, with references to the Messianic age. And some preachers added another short prayer to these eschatological conclusions. Eschatological meaning end of days conclusions, because that's what Messianism is. It's the end of days. This prayer may at first have had no fixed formula, but was freely worded by the preacher. And he's talking specifically about Yehi Shemei Rabbah Mevarach Le'olam Olamei Almayah, which is seen as the linchpin of the Kaddish. And so one such prayer that was built on that sentence was the Kaddish. In other words, first came Yehi Shmei Rabbah Mevarach Le'olam Olamei Almayah, which was said at the end of a sermon, and then over time that became constructed into a prayer which we now know as Kaddish. Any questions or comments up to this point?
I have a question.
Yeah.
You said that like who said that it's supposed to be ending with messianic praising or phraseology?
So there's no one who is explicitly stated here as having that view, but it is within some of the what we call halachic midrash that would happen. So it just becomes part of it over time. I don't think we can ascribe it to an individual. I think it became more of a cultural norm. Yeah, Pamela.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we have any context to when this is starting being part of the service, just because in your terms that you use with the preacher and the sermon, it sounds very maybe reform with trying to get the language close to Christian talk, but it has to have deeper roots than the reform movement when it starts.
I'm not sure I understand what you're saying. The messianic part of it is reform.
Yeah, well, it's what you just read to us. It was the sermon and the preacher, or what was the term for the person doing that, and it's like those are very Christian terms.
Well, I'm going to challenge you on that. So much of our tradition is built on sermons. They weren't called sermons; they were called petichtas, but there is a long-standing tradition in Aramaic of big treatises. And in fact, Shabbat HaGadol, which is right before Pesach, is seen as a quintessential moment for giving drashot. It is actually, they got it from us, probably.
Right.
And it goes way back.
Maybe it's just the terms that this book is using is off-putting for me, because it makes me think about church terms rather than synagogue. And I was wondering, because of that, if this thing goes back to Talmudic references, is that meaning that this is something that has been around being said since the time of the sages? Or
what they're saying is that it's constructed on a sentence that goes back to the time of the Tanaim. Okay. But it is not the prayer. So this is what's great about Elbogen. He's saying, okay, let's look at this historically and see its development. And that's what where we see that in around 600 CE is the first time we see a Kaddish, I think, in a Siddur, in a prayer book. It says here, as a liturgical prayer, we find Kaddish first in a Palestinian source, Tractate Sofrim, composed around 600. So Tractate Sofrim is not the Talmud, but it is post-Talmudic, kind of the continuation of that process. I guess it's Gaonic in the period of the Geonim, which are the brilliant ones. A Gaon is sort of like a brilliant scholar. So it would be in that time period. There in that prayer book, it comes at the end of the Torah reading in connection with a section. Yeah, and then Siddur Amram also mentions it. So it finds its way into the prayer book after the Talmud, but well before 1000.
Okay, so what I was trying to listen to what you were reading. So were these what you're calling sermons, but I would know as drashot? Was it that they were so powerfully like trying to get people to do something that they didn't want to, that they needed to have words of consolation at the end? I guess that's what I'm asking.
I think that we have a long-standing tradition of ending things with references to messianism. And okay. I think that that's what's going on here as well. The world is imperfect. Words of Torah are going to get us to that perfect world. So let's end on a note. We have it in so many ways. We have it, even the Amidah, at the end of the day, the sentence, Oseh Shalom b'Romav, is a prayer for messianism, if you think of it honestly. May there actually be that peace that's universal. And just like it's peaceful in the heavens, may it be down here. Well, that's a messianic reference. May we finally have agency and the ability to build Mashiach's vision, God's vision, with a Mashiach, with a Messiah. So I think it's just part of Jewish rhetoric. Even the way the Mishnah is structured, often at the end of a tractate of Mishnah or of a chapter of Mishnah, there is a last Mishnah paragraph that alludes to a messianic future. So we just have this as a rhythm in Jewish. We don't see it as much because it's sort of like we don't really understand agriculture anymore because we're not in an agrarian society. We don't always see messianism because we don't really live in a messianic mindset frame But it's very much, once you see it, you can't unsee it. So I think that's what's going on. And if and even the way we end a wedding, we break a glass and we remind ourselves that the world is incomplete. Well, what is that about? It's about imagining a complete world and the marriage as being a force to bring that about. So we're constantly referring to something better than the world that we're in right now, or more fulfilled. And I think at the end of a sermon or a drash, whatever you want to call it, is fine. Well, I will say a word about that. This book mentions sermons, it mentions preachers, it uses language that we use. Well, just because Christians use it doesn't mean that it's not our language. Especially in the 19th century and 20th century, when a lot of the Haskalah movement, the Jewish Enlightenment movement, took off, and people were looking at the sources from an academic perspective within Protestant, especially German society. So they used the language that was, the vernacular of the day. But it isn't any different. Then, after especially 1967, rhetoric changed. I mean, I'd be very interested in what the linguists would say about how we talk about scholarship. We talk about the Yerushalmi instead of calling it the Palestinian Talmud, when in fact it really should be called the Palestinian Talmud, because it was in the region that becomes known as Palestine for hundreds and hundreds of years. But the removal of the word preacher, also early Reform had in prayer books, it would refer to rabbis as reverend. And that was not seen as strange. That was just the vernacular of the day. So it's not any different. This sermon versus a Christian preacher giving a sermon, in the sense that both of them are a religious leader standing in front of a group, sharing words of what they consider Torah, and having a charge or a vision for what the world should look like. And so it makes sense to end it as we do with the Kaddish D'Rabanan, right? We end with Kaddish D'Rabanan, which is all about both praising the scholars and imagining Oseh Shalom b'mromav, a better world that's just around the corner for all of us.
Thank you, Rabbi. That really helped me.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Let's take a look at the text, even though there's so much more that we could do on this. Let me just find any questions while I pull this up.
I do have one, but we could talk about it another time. Just if the Kaddish is breaking up sections, I always wondered, why do we have the Hatzi Kaddish between the Aliyah, the seventh Aliyah, and Maftir? Because that we're still in the Torah service.
That's a great question. Well, I can get a definitive answer, but you'll have to remember that the Maftir is this add-on. And it isn't really the Torah reading. It's connected to the Haftarah. So in a way, it's the end of a section, right? The real reading is through the seventh Aliyah, and then we're done. But we have this little additional piece. We'd have to look a lot closer at it, but my sense of the history here is that Haftarah, which we learn, at least in traditional circles, is a way to evade the censors who would not allow us to read Torah, right? There was a dictum or a mandate placed on the society during the Roman era that Torah was forbidden to be taught after the temple's destroyed. And famously, Rabbi Akiba goes and teaches Torah anyway against the censors. So one way to get around the censors was to do Haftarah, to do prophetic books, because for whatever reason that was somehow not seen as excluded from the sources. So the Maftir is very much connected to Haftarah and therefore a different section. I will read this from Bogan that I think would be helpful. The reason that Kaddish is used in the liturgy is the blessing that it contains and the fact that the words Birchata Shirata Tushbechata, blessings, songs, and praises, were understood as referring to the prayers. It was considered to be appropriate for mourning ceremonies because of the eschatological petition at the beginning, the sanctification of the name of God, and the coming of God's kingdom are intimately connected, especially in the prophet Ezekiel with resurrection. And doubtless the word consolations, nechamta, right? Nechamata, it says, is understood as relating to the comforting of mourners. To these real connections was added the mystical conception that the recitation of Kaddish has magic powers over the living and dead. And even the response Amen after the Kaddish was supposed to have power to influence the divine decree. To this was added the idea that sons are obliged to act in behalf of the welfare of their parents' souls. This can be accomplished through participation in public worship and the reciting of certain prayers in the presence of the congregation, and according to the mystical legend of Rabbi Akiva, especially through the recitation of certain hymnic prayers like Kaddish and Baruch Hashem, bless the Lord. Now these traditions have to do only with the liturgical Kaddish, but out of it the custom gradually arose that sons recite Kaddish for a full year after the death of their parents. This custom originated in Germany during the Great Persecutions. It is still completely foreign to Machzor Vitry, and Rabbi Elazar of Worms still expresses himself very cautiously about it. But Rabbi Isaac Or Zarua in 1220 already relates that in Bohemia and in the Rhineland, the orphans recite Kaddish at the end of the service, while in France no care is given as to who recites it. So you can see that despite the way we have these like nice, simple, clear packaging of traditions, even within Ashkenazic lands, there were different traditions that emerged and different minhagim that eventually consolidate, probably because of mercantilism and the interactions across boundaries that bring people into community with one another. Okay, we're at 9:30. We haven't even looked at the prayer. Should we next week actually go through it in detail? How does that sound?
Good. This was good.
Very good. Well, thank you, everyone, and have a blessed day.
You too.
Bye-bye.